Stunning reporting this week, which has revealed what some prominent and, in some cases, elected members of the young Republican groups across the country are comfortable saying in the comfort of their own little group chat bubbles. Republicans in the state of New York have moved to revoke the chapter of their state's young Republican group. That move comes days after Politico unveiled a massive horde of Telegram chats that span more than 7 months. Chats among the young Republicans, who are all adults. We're looking at you, JD. And in many cases, leaders of their groups in New York, Kansas, Arizona, and Vermont. The thousands of pages of chats, many of which are too vile and graphic to put on television or even read to you, show how these Republicans casually make racist jokes and use slurs about topics like slavery, rape, Hitler, and the Holocaust. Peter Giunta, who Politico describes as the most prominent voice in the chat, spreading racist messages, was running to chair the Young Republican National Federation and said in regards to his candidacy for that position, quote, "Everyone that votes no is going to the gas chamber," end quote. He apologized for what was said in the messages, but also caveated his response by saying he wasn't sure that they hadn't been doctored. Donald Trump has yet to say anything about the chats, but J.D. Vance has spoken out on the story. Listen to the sitting vice president of the United States describe the actions of people in the chat who are as old as 40 and hold jobs in politics.
The reality is that kids do stupid things, especially young boys. They tell edgy, offensive jokes. Like, that's what kids do. And I really don't want us to grow up in a country where a kid telling a stupid joke, telling a very offensive stupid joke, is cause to ruin their lives. And at some point, we're all going to have to say, enough of this BS.
Yeah. They're not kids. Joining me at the table, former Texas Congressman Colin Allred. He is currently running for the U.S. Senate. Sarah Longwell is still here. I want you to respond to this story, and not just the fact of it. I think all of us know that there's hate, unfortunately, in all over this country, in the hearts of some people. It is far outweighed by goodness. I still believe. I hope that's still true. But it's the response to it that I think is the flashing red light for American democracy.
No, it is. And, I was captain of my football team at Baylor. And let's just take for a moment that many of these are guys. And let's just say that some of them are young, right? And leadership matters. Leadership matters both in terms of if you hear things that people shouldn't be saying, you got to police that in the moment. But certainly afterwards, then you have to send an incredibly clear signal that, hey, guys, this is not okay. And if this continues, there's serious consequences for them. But if anyone else does this, you're going to find out what's going to happen. And the most concerning thing, like you said, is the President of the United States has said nothing about it. And what really could he say? That, we follow my example. I've not been saying hateful things all these years.
I mean, look, I worked for President Bush, and when there were racist leaders in the Republican Party at any level, and I would say George H.W. Bush had to do the same thing. Democratic leaders have had to do. When there is something poisonous in your coalition, you call it out and say, I'll win without that part of my coalition. Donald Trump, for his part, when it was David Duke, challenged Jake Tapper to tell him who David Duke was. I mean, this is not isolated, which I think is why it's a story.
Yeah, I remember my first month or two in Congress, Steve King from Iowa had just said some really vile white nationalist comments. And I had to sit in the chair, the speaker's chair, while he was defending himself one night. And I remember at that time, Kevin McCarthy and the Republican leadership removed him from his committees without us ever having to say anything. They decided on their campaign arm that they're going to run someone against him to make sure that he was not going to be their nominee and that he didn't represent their party. And they drove him out of the party, right? That is the response that you'd want to see, to say, let's make this very clear. This has no home in our party. But what I think you and I both agree on is that Donald Trump has said very much and very clearly there is a home for this in our party. And that's why you see it showing up.
What do you do in a country where, the last director of the FBI, Christopher Wray, testified on September 20th of 2020 about the threat environment. And this is ahead of Joe Biden becoming president 2 months later. But he says the greatest threat to the homeland, as opposed to the years after 9/11, is now domestic violent extremism. And I think this is a direct quote. And within that bucket, by far the largest group is racially motivated violent extremists. And within that bucket, it's white supremacy. I mean, racism is ancient, but that was new, that the greatest threat to the homeland was racially motivated domestic violent extremism.
Yeah, unfortunately, we have example after example to point to. And, I've always thought, and I'm glad you mentioned President Bush, because I've always thought that part of the role of the President of the United States is to be a moral leader as well. And don't always live up to it, right? But to at least try to remind the country and to point us toward our better angels, right? And I think for most of our history, we've had presidents who have successfully at least tried. They've not always succeeded. I think this is unprecedented for us to be in a period where the President of the United States is actually fanning those flames. And it has real world consequences. There are real people who are being targeted and being hurt. And there are groups that feel very empowered. In fact, I was there on January 6th. I saw them, I heard them, and then they are now not only empowered, they've been pardoned, they've been praised, they've been said that they're patriots. They're trying to turn January 6th into the next July 4th for them, right? So we're in an incredibly dangerous moment. But I also agree with what you said a little while ago, which is that I think we're still a fundamentally decent country, and that most people don't like this. And I've just been going around Texas. This is not where people are. And I think we have to remember that too, and not think that we're unsure on our footing and that maybe we were wrong about the country, but say, no, they're wrong about the country. And this is how we can show them the way out of this.